We're going to be talking about literal equations for one more day, and I'm just going to teach you a couple things about solving literal equations for a few special cases. So to start out with, what I'm going to do when a variable appears more than once. All right, if I'm solving for a variable that appears multiple times in an equation and cannot be simplified, sometimes they do simplify, and I can get only one variable that I'm solving for. But if I look at this equation right here, 2k is not combinable with 2j. I just can't. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to factor. Factoring is the opposite of distribution. What I mean by that is there is a number that I multiplied to two terms, and I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to take out that multiplication. Look at this right here. I'm solving for k, and there's two of them. That means I multiplied both of these terms by k. So I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to pull that outside of parentheses. Because I'm undoing that, I'm saying don't actually multiply that k. That's essentially dividing by k. So if I divide by k, and by pulling it out, that leaves me with a 2. If I divide that by k, I'm pulling that out, that leaves me with a plus j equals b. Now, if you notice, you could redistribute it back in and you'd get the same thing, which is why that's this factoring method is what I want to do, because that leaves me with just my one variable k and a multiplication between these two things. That means in order to solve for k, just like yesterday we talked about, I am going to divide by this entire parentheses, 2 plus j, divided by 2 plus j. And that means I have left over, because those two parentheses, 2 plus j's, are going to cancel out. K is equal to b divided by, and I can drop those parentheses now that there's nothing on the outside, 2 plus j. And that would be my final answer. Now, what to do if your variable is squared? Now, to undo a squared value, you're going to take the square root. Remember that in your order of operations, exponents come first after grouping. So when you solve an equation, remember you're undoing order of operations, and so that's going to be the last thing that we do. So first off, for t, identify that variable t. I need to get rid of bx, the minus m, and the squared. And since the squared is the closest thing, remember, it's the last thing I get rid of. That means I need to get rid of bx and m. They are each their own term. I can separate that into 3 terms. You can actually get rid of whichever term you want to first, because they're both equally as close to m. So here I go. Let's go ahead and get rid of bx first. It's a positive term, so I'm going to subtract that minus bx. And I knew that they weren't going to combine or be like terms, so I wrote it horizontally to begin with. And I also need to get rid of minus m. So I can write plus m. Plus m. And that zeroes out. So what I'm left with is t squared is equal to 7 minus bx plus m. Now you could have added m to begin with. So you could have had 7 minus bx, 7 plus m minus bx, and that would be equivalent. But we chose this way. So last step, remember up here, to undo a squared value, you're going to take the square root. So I'm going to take the square root of both sides and everything on both sides, and the squared is going to cancel with the square root, and I'm going to be left with t is equal to the square root of that whole thing, 7 minus bx plus m. And that's my answer. And that is the special types of literal equations that I'm going to talk about today. So have a good day.